I mean, maybe having them there would have changed the minds of a few of the, insurrectionists. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think you still would have had a similar outcome.
Well, and I guess I asked because Trump's deployment of National Guard troops to American cities to protect law enforcement and buildings might have been useful to protect law enforcement in the United States Capitol. I mean, what's the difference between the deployment?
Well, I mean, obviously on January 6, 2021, you had an active insurrection. You had thousands of violent Americans assaulting police officers, pushing through barricades, damaging property, making their way into the Capitol complex in an attempt to subvert an election. What's happening right now is purely performative. I mean, if you take Washington, D.C., for example, I mean, I was out in the streets of Washington, D.C. I saw what the deployment of the National Guard looked like, and you pretty much had two things happening. You had National Guard troops that were acting as gardeners, that were engaged in picking up trash, that were mowing the lawn, that were using, a weed whacker. And then you also had National Guard troops that were armed tourists, that were taking in the sights of, downtown Washington, D.C. I saw hundreds of troops kind of aimlessly milling about at the World War II Memorial, the Lincoln Memorial, the National Mall. And when you talk about, Pam Bondi cited all these crime, statistics and the amount of arrests that were made, during that time period and how crime went down dramatically. Well, I mean, listen, every year at the Metropolitan Police Department, we have a summer crime initiative. And we select neighborhoods in Washington, D.C., where there's, spike in crime and violent crime particularly. And we deploy every single asset that we have available to us, to include, utilizing federal partnerships. I mean, it's overkill. But does it reduce crime? Of course it does. When there's a cop on every single street corner, criminals are not stupid. It displaces the crime. I mean, obviously, if you were to go back and do a study and say, like, okay, look at the streets and the, outside of that area, crime goes up significantly. But in that area where we're focused on, it goes down, and they can report that to the public. It's the same premise here in Washington, D.C. You had this, deployment of the National Guard, which really had no public safety function whatsoever, other than the fact that they, had a command presence in an area. But then you also had the deployment of all these federal resources, which, I would argue as somebody who worked in a numerous federal task force while I was a police officer, that's a good thing.